Welcome to the Impact Design Workshop, where we'll be exploring the topic of redesigning society. This workshop will uncover design in a wider aspect as an instrument or tool for positive impact on people and the planet.
We are very thrilled to introduce the moderator for this panel, Sara Sozzani Maino, Head of Vogue Talents at Vogue Italia. Take it away, Sara.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this workshop tonight, which is Redesigning Society. I'm Sara Sozzani Maino. I'm a head of special project at Italian Vogue and head of Vogue Talents. And I would like to introduce the panel of today. And for once, I would love that each of you would introduce yourself a little bit more rather than titles. And so I begin with Aude Byrne. Please introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, so my name is Aude. I'm a Chief Sustainability Officer at Chloe, and so leading our transformation toward a purpose-driven organization. I joined Chloe 5 years ago, and I'm on this position since 2 years.
Thank you. And then we have also Lisa Kohlert. Please welcome.
Hi everyone. So I'm Lisa. I'm VP of Business Development for Chloe Virtual Fashion here in Europe, and I've been leading the office here since 4.5 years at the company.
Then we have Edoardo Iannuzzi.
I am Edoardo, and I'm the founder and CSO of ACBC Anything Can Be Changed, which is a sneaker company. And we are trying to lead our partners towards their sustainability goals.
Thank you, Eduardo. And then we have also Wole Osunde. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Wole. I'm a registered nurse and designer and founder of Against Medical Advice from Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you. And finally, we have Crispin Argento.
Everyone, I'm Crispin. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of FiberTrace. We're a technology platform that provides 2020 vision in the supply chain for brands, suppliers, and consumers.
So welcome to all of you. And before asking questions, I would want to ask a general question to everyone, because obviously in the last 2 years, there have been really big changes in the industry. And not forgetting obviously the pandemic, but I think there has been really a turnover and a very big attention on what we mean when we want to be responsible towards the planet, which is not just about the fashion industry, but the industry in all its forms. And tonight we have 5 great examples of how changes can be done and how there can be done. But the question is, what do you think the next generation is looking for fashion? Because I think that the big question is that, which is linked also to consumers, but the next generation, which I always kind of supported, because it's our future. It's the generation that we need, to sensibilize, to aware, and also in a way to satisfy. So I'll begin with Lisa.
Sure. What we can see with the new generation growing up, I think things they are looking for is inclusivity, for example, diversity, but also sustainability is a big topic for them. And they also want to see a more conscious and eco-friendly production, I would say. So what we can see is that the generations growing up today, they are really adding a lot of pressure to the brands. And I think it's good. I think it's also needed for the industry to really change. And what is nice to see is that there's a lot of brands emerging who are really focused on sustainability, and even the bigger brands are taking action. So be it recycling or using ocean plastic or things like that. We can see that things are moving for a better, which is certainly great to see.
And Crispin, may I ask you, also asking maybe for one of the first questions about how important, it's the sensibilization about how important is the need for brands and suppliers to collaborate, engage with the value chain, because obviously this is also very important.
Yeah, I think, a common tenet that we often miss is that products begin with raw materials, right? And through those raw materials, multiple complex processes happen at stages of the value chain that are often invincible to brands and certainly invincible to consumers. And to really create a circular economy, to really be responsible, requires brands and their suppliers to go farther and farther deeper into their value chains to understand these materials and these processes. And so, with respect to where the industry is going, I think consumers, but also government, is wanting a truth to materials and a truth to process that reconnects our relationship with the products that we're purchasing. It's not to say that we're going to move to a slow fashion model, but certainly brands as, the high street like H&M to brands perhaps like Chloe, who are on this call, are trying to reestablish their connection with their consumers to create more loyalty, to create more honesty and transparency in their product. And that creates value and luxury.
Thank you, Crispin. And Wole, your reality is, I was reading it and I was really fascinating because you decided to create, your label against, medical advice and the impact on society and also the awareness you want to create. And I think this is fundamental because there are many aspects which people maybe do not consider and they're not aware, and you have decided to create this awareness towards the medical impact, which is obviously, even at this time of the moment, it's very important because obviously, not forgetting the pandemic, but you decided to create this world around you to create awareness. And how is the impact happening for you right now?
Yes, I feel like both sides of my life kind of directly influence each other because my work as a nurse and the stories I hear at work and the products I see that we use, in this medical realm, whether it be like a urinal or a patient gown or, these different objects that I see at work, and I try to incorporate it into my designs in some way, somehow. And earlier, someone touched on the fact that people are looking for a more accountable story from brands and from companies. And I do feel like a lot of the newer generation are looking for a story they can relate to, a story that they can see themselves being a part of. And that's what they want to buy into. I also have noticed a lot of younger people have been more cautious about how they spend their dollar. As opposed to buying many clothes, you'd rather buy that one item that you really, really want and just wait until you can buy the next item that you really, really want, as opposed to just consuming clothes. And I feel like that also ties into sustainability and how brands can kind of reach out to the consumer directly through what they're making and through the story that they can create around their realm. But yeah, work has been very interesting. The pandemic has been very hard, and I feel like balancing the two sometimes becomes unbearable, but it's, I feel like it definitely trains my mind on both sides. I get to speak to the public directly and see what they're going through during this time. And I kind of use their stories and use that into creating my story as a designer through my brand. Cool.
Yeah, thank you. No, and I have also this sensation that in the last year, I don't know, probably, we've been very aware and very impacted by what everything happened. And it seems that there is a big sensibilization on many themes. And one of the themes that Lisa was saying is about, inclusivity, diversity, and all the now in Chloe, you've been working a lot on this, inclusivity, because especially not in fashion, but in general, in big companies, there's always this imbalance between the positions that women have to instead of men. And so you've been working a lot, and there are really exciting numbers coming over because there's much more presence of women in positions important, which obviously it's something that there's always been speaking about. So how is this happening, and why do you think it's happening now? Obviously, but because I know it's not always an easy question to answer, but it's happening, which is positive, I think.
Yeah, no, I think globally, not talking about Chloe, yes, there is something happening, but we must be careful because following the COVID crisis, I think it has slowed down a lot the figures and the pace to gender equality for women. And now the years to close the gender gap are increasing strongly after COVID. So we must be very careful to keep this subject on the table. At Chloe, gender equality is not an issue inside Chloe, I would say. We are a fashion house that has been created by a woman and for women. So we have never had an inside gender equality issue. As you said, our numbers are very, very good and we have a lot of women in leadership position, but we wanted to put this subject as a purpose, a global purpose for our company. And that means that now we look at this criteria at putting women forward in everything we do, and especially through sourcing, through our supply chain, because we talk, there are the woman in the head office, but it's also about the woman making our product, and most of the time it is woman. 80% of the workforce in fashion is woman. So we are very, very careful to have a change through our supplier. And also in all our community programs, we are focusing our effort on gender equality. So for us, it's not more, of course, we look at internal data and we can always improve, but honestly, in some departments, we mainly stick to recruit men also to be equal, but throughout all our activity, we know that we can do a lot of effort to put our message to support women.
No, yeah, I think that's important, and yeah, probably for big brands, always recruitment. It's a very sensible phase of it, and it's the most important. But obviously, you have to always look, around and not just in one direction and see, really what's happening. And today, obviously, our attention can be very kind of in a way distracted, but because there's so many inputs from the outside. I mean, just think about how social media has grown in the last years. And I mean, I don't know if it's your sensation, but sometimes I feel like, or maybe I'm too old enough, or I'm too old, or there's too much, to see, because you're very stimulating of what's happening all around. But then, to keep the focus, I mean, you have to keep it. I mean, you cannot just always, look around and think about, oh, he's doing that or doing that. I mean, it's very important to keep it, very straightforward. And Eduardo, you have done your collection ACBC. It's been, I think, 5 years now. I mean, we've been knowing you I've been knowing you since the beginning, and I want to also congratulate, because obviously you began a project which was very experimental, because it was more technical. It was, I'm just opening a small paragraph about it, because when I was looking at this project, I was saying, oh, this is great. But then sometimes when you are a little bit distorted in the fashion industry, you look at even, how it's, a little bit the design. And maybe at the beginning, the design was the one that you looked less, because you were thinking more about the technical part, which is fundamental. But right now you're also collaborating with brands such as Armani, Missoni, Moschino, which is excellent, because I do think that it's there are brands that maybe in a way they're trying obviously to be more responsible. So how are these collaborations going, and what do you think they still need, to go in this direction? Because I think that in a way you're helping them to understand how things can be done in a better way.
Yeah, true. I mean, when we started, we came out with this project that had the principles of design for disassembly, design for recycling, and design for repairing. And it was definitely had its limits in terms of aesthetics. Fact is that, during these collaborations, I really learned. I come from industrial design, so I have to admit that my mind is not so imprisoned in, aesthetics and the thing of fashion to be so good looking and sexy in terms of product. I learned this in time. And how did I learn it actually? And how did we get these skills? We got these skills by getting people that come from fashion. So we are, a group of various minds. I keep my open thinking, and this is definitely important in order to drive innovation. But we continuously confront let's say, ethics that we can join with innovation, with aesthetics and the target price. And I have to admit that when we collaborate, when we confront ourselves with our partners, we confront with contemporary performance and luxury. So we really have an open view on what the market thinks like. So from, I don't want to make names, but it's like mass production and the contemporary, performance and luxury. So it's three completely different fields. And the ones that are more difficult to change mind is unfortunately luxury. Luxury has a very, and I'm not saying it's a fault, because they are tied to a certain price point and they need to deliver exactly the same experience. Touching a product, modifying a product on which a company is built is the most risky action that a company can do. And if I have my 1,000 euro shoe, which has always been sold with leather, and I know from a product carbon footprint or from a life cycle analysis that 80% of the impact is coming from the leather, but I want to reduce 50% and I don't want to touch the leather, I cannot move. So what we really are finding it more difficult to join aesthetics and touch and feel with ethics than we are having to join performance with ethics. In a certain way now, circular technologies are giving us the performance. So it's no longer plastics are brittle, bioplastics are brittle, and recycled are failing from a performance point of view. Is more right now the most difficult task for us is to replace the luxury materials.
Then going back, Lisa, obviously we've been talking about everything very physical and very happening. Instead, obviously now the other big thing happening is all about digitalization and virtual fashion and NFT and what's going behind that. And for me, I'm very transparent. It gives me a headache because it's like already another world opening up, but it's a very fascinating world because it's something that can really bring change. And so I just wanted to ask you, what are you working on and how do you see this impact on virtual fashion, on brands, but also on consumption? Because it's something that I don't know if it's just my sensation, but it really went onto the market almost from one day to another. Nobody was talking about, people were starting to talk about it, I would say maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but nobody was really understanding how it worked or how it could, it was a little bit like Instagram. I think most of us downloaded it and then kept it on the phone for like 6 months, a year without knowing how to use it, and probably, in a way, virtual fashion and all what's surrounding, it's not the same, but it's something that now everyone is keeping an eye on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a very good question. And it's true that there has been a real push for the digital fashion industry. To be honest, it's ongoing since many, many years. Me personally, I've been part of the digital fashion industry for more than 10 years now. Also, Clo Virtual Fashion already exists over 10 years. And it was interesting to hear that obviously everything starts with a fabric, and of course we're also looking into other options than leather or something, or at least reducing. But I think it will be very hard, realistically speaking, to change all the production like we are used to today. There's things happening, but this will happen step by step. But what the brands, the users, the designers can do already today is really start a step earlier in the process. So already while designing, while developing all those products, you can start to do so with the help of new technology like Clo software. So the idea here being that yeah, you can visualize new collections, new styles, and really make decisions based on a 3D garment already. So there's tons of prototypes, physical prototypes, which will never make it into the stores, right? Because the styles are being dropped just before. But what is still very common is that for every style, for every product you see hanging in a store, there will be 5 or even 6 prototypes being produced physically in advance. And I believe this is no longer needed. So especially at early stage, it is really feasible, and the technology is far enough to simulate and create those garments and accessories in 3D, make decisions based on this, and then drastically reduce the number of physical samples. And this is also how we can have a positive impact on the environment.
Wole, I have a question for you, because you have I mean, your brand is relatively new, and you've decided, to work in a process of more responsibility, more sustainable. Is there something that you've learned? Because obviously, when you open your own brand, and you have your visions, you have the message you want, you have your challenges and your point of views or where you want to get. But I'm sure that you've learned something new, apart from the challenges of doing a new brand, but with determined messages which are very important. But is there something you've learned? Also, Crispin was talking now about the process of getting materials, which one is from one country than the others. I mean, I guess this is also something that in the end, when you're working on your brand, it comes up as a problem or something to be solved.
Yeah, I've been trying to be more. He was talking about textiles, and I've been trying to be more accountable about our footprint, where our products come from, and how long this process may take, and how it'll affect our production as well. I've been learning more about dyes and using more natural dyes, especially when we do things like hoodies and more basic products, that we can potentially use one type of fabric and then you incorporate different natural dyeing processes that will allow us to do different colorways. Or maybe it may be recycling our fabric. If we have some knitwear that was left from our past season, I've been learning more about incorporating it into figuring out ways how I can use that same fabric as opposed to wasting it. And I've been just trying to understand more about how I can because certain textiles, there'll be certain processes that I would like to incorporate into my brand, because understanding where it may come from or how exactly to do this at the highest quality is really where the biggest battle is. How can I print this, or how can I do this where it's still sustainable and still at the same time very high quality? And that's a battle that I've been trying to find the middle ground between. I've also learned a lot about made in US as opposed to made overseas. I make all of my clothes mostly in New York City because I like to oversee it, and I like to see all of the quality. I've tried to make clothes overseas, and it may be cheaper, but most of the time it's me sacrificing the quality of the product. Well, I've been trying to find more overseas manufacturing that reaches the quality I would like it to be at. So I've been seeing a lot of production in Portugal, or a lot of production in Italy, and that meets where I want it to be. But sometimes I'll try to manufacture something in China and it won't come out. I've been trying to make some varsity jackets, and the leather of the prototype of the sample I made in China wasn't where I needed it to be, and I had to completely scrap what I made. And I'm now just making it at home as opposed to trying to source outwardly. I feel in the products I make, the quality is really where I want to maintain and sustain. So for me, a lot of this new, now that we're producing our first actual collection, a lot of it is me trying to figure out how I can make the product at the quality that I want it to be without sacrificing a lot of the time and the money and the traveling of the materials. So that's kind of where that's been my biggest challenge, especially now that I finished most of the sampling and I want to take it to actual consumer level production. It's hard to put everything that I put into the sample into the level that I want the consumer. I want the consumer to feel the product the way I felt it. And that's what it's hard. That's been the hardest thing for me to replicate. And I've kind of been learning about that process.
Now I want a little bit to shift, because another, always one of those big questions is if brands have certifications, or which certificate do you have, and then always understanding what certifications brands have, what do they mean. So Oda, I'm going to ask you, I mean, I know that recently Chloe became B Corp certificate, which is very, very important. And maybe, I know it's not easy to explain it in 2 minutes what that this mean, but apart from maybe explaining to the audience, what does it mean a B Corp certificate? Because it's a very important status for for a brand in general, which also Eduardo has. And I think that getting this certified is also changing probably a little bit, the status and the way of working of the company. So if you want to explain us how you managed and what this brought for you to get it,
Yeah, but yes, in our road to becoming a purpose-driven organization, what is very, very important to us is to be transparent, accountable, and to collaborate. So for us, a good way to show that we were transparent and accountable was to have an external certification. We decided to go for B Corp because for me it is the most complete and demanding certification. It assesses the whole activities of the company, from governance to communities impact to customer, people, teams, etc. So it's very complete, very demanding. We have more than 300 questions regarding all these aspects. And regarding what you say to Eduardo, it's very interesting because when we decided to become B Corp certified, we announced it, and all other luxury maison and brand were, I would say, quite surprised and a little bit not at all understanding our strategy, because B Corp is not very used by the luxury world. But now it's getting much and much more attention, so we hope to inspire others. And for us, it was really a good tool to frame our transformation, to accelerate our effort, to scale them, also to involve all our stakeholders, from consumer to supply chain partners. And so to become B Corp certified, we did many changes in terms of governance. For instance, we have a sustainability board with external advisors. We changed our company status to include our mission. And here we talk about product and production. We change, of course, fine. So the main goal is to change our product, because it's what is called about. So we really believe that as a luxury maison, we will continue to design first a beautiful product, but we on top want to add a meaningful impact on people and on planet. So we did a lot of things that start from more measurement, more data, more rules regarding what a lower impact material is for Chloe, what guidelines do we have, and step by step we change our production.
And Crispin, can I ask you for fiber trace? I mean, obviously digitalization, connections, I mean, it's very important, but what are you working on for like the next year? If you can share us a little bit, about the visions of what you're like reaching, or how you want to be impactful, towards, the market, but also in the impactful of being more responsible.
Yeah, so we are working with dozens and dozens of global brands, both high street and luxury, across the spectrum, and all of their suppliers, a lot of their suppliers in this chain, really to create end-to-end traceability and transparency. But ultimately, that really builds trust. That's what we're using the Fiber Trace tool is. It's not a tool that is used for more scrutiny of the supply chain. It's a tool that leverages and empowers all actors along the chain to have what we call 2020 vision, both up and down the value chain, so that they understand where their raw materials are coming from, where their converted goods are going to, and then all the way through from brands. And so our goal for the next year is really to continue to engage various brands to engage in pilots, is what we're doing now. And then those pilots turn into long-term commitments as they're rolled out across their entire value chain. So for example, one major brand, is working with 1,800 tier 1 suppliers, we're working with 10 or 15 of those suppliers, tracing all the way back to their raw materials, adding the fiber trace element and moving that through so that these brands have 20/20 visibility. At the same time, the suppliers that are in those chains, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, are also gaining visibility into where their products are coming from and where their products are going to. A lot of spinners, for example, don't know that their products might end up in H&M garments. And a lot of H&M, of course, doesn't know that there are certain spinners in their value chain making yarn for their knits, and that those products are can be traced all the way back to a farm that's in India. The other thing is it's allowing brands to engage more closely with their raw materials producers. So for example, you'll see a lot of brands like Bestseller out there who are investing in farmers, in organic agriculture. A lot of brands are committing to regenerative farmers in Australia. This is in cotton largely, and that's also, how we see it. It's also happening in wool and cashmere and other products as well. Let's say the integrity piece is part of it, in the sense we know that there's a lot of fraud in organic cotton. We know that there's a lot of fraud in recycled polyester. We know that there's not a full disclosure of some of the materials out there. Like I mentioned, mushroom leather is actually mostly polyester, right? For a lot of the solution providers out there. So it's important that brands understand what those real impacts are and what those materials actually look like and where they come from. And that they can choose to then, communicate that onto their consumers to add that more richness in their storytelling.
Thank you, I wanted to now ask, and I'm going to ask you to answer to this question, everyone. Because, like, for example, Eduardo, what is your biggest challenge right now? Because obviously you are all in different stages of, obviously everything is happening fast. There are changes, creating awareness, but there's also the consumer side. It's a lot to think about. And I think it's also a matter of challenges, because you want to go better, you want to improve, but then, it's about obstacles and challenges. So I'm gonna ask you, to each of you, which is, the greatest challenge you're facing right now. So Eduardo, if you wanna start.
Maybe the biggest challenge that we are facing is to, it's not really towards ourselves, because we are in our newly transformed business model. Really, we are, our main effort is going to lead who has an impact. So between medium and large companies, to reduce their CO2 impact, is to basically shift their attention from only thinking about the origin of the material to actually thinking about embracing and thinking about the whole life cycle. So changing kind of their mindset and really thinking about not only circularity in the ingredients, but about circularity as a whole. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we are facing. And we are seeing maybe the ones that are anticipating this and are moving more towards this thinking are very few. So many times, even when they think about the material, they think, okay, yes, this material actually, is a better material because maybe has a 60%, this polymer, non-fiber polymer has a 60% renewable content. But the material will stay there for 1,400 years because it has covalent bonds. So they don't think about this aspect of this downside that is so simple to get, and it's just by changing the mindset and thinking about not only the beginning but the end.
Thank you, Lisa. And for CLO, which is the biggest challenge right now?
Yeah, I can fully agree with Eduardo. It's really the mindset of people. I think people are really stuck in their current processes, and people are maybe also very comfortable. not change anything, but also people are afraid to change, I guess. And I mean, obviously you can't change things overnight. It takes some time to adapt to new processes and so on. But at the same time, I again agree with Eduardo. It's not just about one part of the chain. It really requires everyone together to make this change happen. So it's really an effort from multiple sides to really achieve our goals. So yeah, definitely the mindset has been a huge challenge. So yeah, I guess what we need to achieve is to make this topic more sexy, more relevant, even more so also in social media and so on. But I believe it is starting and it is happening already with the new generations, but it will take some time.
And Aude?
Okay, so I would say two challenges. So for the first one, I would agree with Lisa and Eduardo. It's a cultural change mindset. So we are quite a big company and we were not created as a sustainable company. So we have to change everyone, we have to train teams, and we will succeed only if everyone in the company is daily job change. So it's a big challenge. And the second one is for sure traceability, get the full traceability of all our products and all our category. And we are improving, but as I say, it's a journey and there are a lot to do in that field.
Thank you. Wole, what is your big challenge?
I would say my biggest challenge is being accountable of the production line and just how we're making our garments. I feel like as a new brand, it has been rather easy to imprint my voice on the collection and how I want it to roll out and how I want the consumer to see my brand and the message behind my clothing. But I've been learning more about like the business side of it and understanding just the footprint of the clothing and following each piece from the beginning to printing to sewing to like just following the production line and being accountable of all those steps. Because I feel like as a new brand, and this is being my first collection that I'm about to release, I feel like maybe a lot of pressure, I would say, just because I feel like this is my first step into the world and how they'll embrace my brand. Like I've released things here and there in capsule collections, but I feel like this being my first full, 20 look, like an actual collection in my eyes. I just want to be accountable of our garments and make sure the quality is where I need it to be.
Thank you. And Crispin?
I think to echo what a lot of other people said, it's changing hearts and minds. And that's not just, getting people to sign petitions and to make commitments that are not fulfilled, right? We've seen enough of that. Changing hearts and minds is bringing people down to a place within the supply chain that they don't understand, that they're afraid of, that they don't understand the people, the cultures, the processes. And that is what Aude said is traceability, is understanding where your materials come from, the processes behind those materials so that you can then influence those changes. It requires turning ambition into action. And that's hard to do when, for the last, I would say 30 years of this industry, the brands have benefited from a giant engine of production that they didn't have to engage deeper in their value chain. And now with sustainability, now with regulation, now with emerging greenwashing and misinformation that's out there, largely because of the digital sphere, it's requiring the brands that are truly committed and their suppliers to actually dig deep into their value chains to understand. And that is a massive, massive opportunity, but it's also a huge challenge because it requires education and it requires, like I said, changing hearts and minds.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And going back, I think one of the fundamental pillars is education, because then my last question was for everyone is that obviously you're on the other side trying, to make the changes and do statements and, and prove that there could be changes in positive and that they're happening.
Yeah, if I can just answer, I guess, just because you mentioned I think education on the consumer side, and the 5-6 of us are consumers as well. But I think let's start with education within the brands and the supply chain itself. I can't tell you how many brands I work with who are sophisticated in merchandising and design and sales, have no idea how their products are made. They can't tell the difference between a wool and a cashmere and acrylic and a nylon. So there's a deep level of education that is missing from the brands and that body of knowledge and in the supply chain. And on the consumer side, this might not be popular on this panel, but I don't think it's consumers' responsibility. I think it's the brand's responsibilities, and I think it's government responsibility. As a consumer, I want to go in and buy this jacket, or I want to buy, ABDC shoes, and build my own trust with that brand, knowing that they're doing what's right. I don't want to have a doctorate degree or a master's degree in material science to make a decision on whether or not the uppers on the shoes are good or the organic cotton is real or not in my supply chain. I want to know that the brand that I'm buying from is trusted, and I want that loyalty. I want that trust. And I think consumers nowadays just don't trust brands because there's been so much, frankly, part of my French, bullshit out there that has been perpetuated in the media around what is real and what is not, and what's impactful and what is not impactful. And I think that's the era that we're coming to, is the brands we have to persuade a generation of consumers to even continue buying products.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
I do agree that brands have a stronger responsibility to build communications that are concrete, fact-proven, humble, simple, because today, everyone wants to talk about sustainability, and the big risk is that we lose consumer, and they see greenwashing and they lose trust in the brand. So I think, and what we lack is concrete rules in terms of impact measurement, in terms of how you can communicate. It comes, but it takes time to come, and we miss a uniformized worldwide standard so that everyone should talk the same language. Because so even also to measure emission impact. So for instance, we've clearly uniformized the methodology worldwide, and I think it's very, very important that consumers don't lose trust in the communication of sustainability facts, because otherwise there won't be no action.
At first, I think Sara was mentioning that, when you go as a consumer of a food product, you look at the label and you just look at the ingredients. And from a certain point of view, we can kind of read that. We have the knowledge to read that. It's the beautiful thing of this year, I think, of after COVID, is that we're seeing like most of the bigger companies like setting finally science-based targets, which is, an enormous evolution, an enormous step forward, because finally we have a scientific objective truth to look at. And having said this is a step forward, but to give that number, which is the carbon footprint, which is the toxicity to humans, toxicity to the environment, if we want to simplify in three numbers. To build that number, the measurement isn't that standardized. The way of measurement isn't that standardized in a way that I can do an LCA and hide some things, and I can do a product number footprint and write things in another way. So, but at least finally we have to face and look at the number, and that's already a step forward. Then, having said this, the way we measured and the way we arrived to that number is not that standardized and it's not that secure, but at least is a great thing that we finally have a kind of scientific way to look at things.
Well, thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining the panel talks. Feel free to visit the galleries, the Impact Design Hub, and the Innovation Hub.